Sarah Henderson, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing. A little overdue it feels, so we do welcome you back. Teacher quality is in the headlines once again this week, especially with a focus on maths teachers. Not necessarily something that is new for education ministers around the country, but whose responsibility is it to fix what now looks like a pretty urgent shortfall here?
Well, Greg, great to join you. And there is certainly an urgent shortfall in maths teachers. Some 40% of maths teachers are not qualified, and that needs to be urgently remedied. But there's also a general crisis with teacher shortages right across this country, particularly in the regions. And while we did a lot when we were in government, fixing teacher training with all of those reforms that were proposed, dramatically cutting teacher degrees, the cost of those degrees, and also waiving HECS debts for remote teachers. We just haven't seen any action from this government, and our AMSI, the Australian Mathematical Scientific Institute, is very critical of the government's plan.
Did those changes that you listed there actually have a material increase in teacher supply?
So what we did see is we just didn't see the level of crisis that we see now. So the states and territories are crying out for more teachers. I spoke to a principal yesterday who said we need a busload of teachers in Alice Springs. So there is no doubt, and COVID was a factor, but there's no doubt that things have got a lot worse. And one of the things that we've been prosecuting, Greg, is the importance of encouraging mid-career professionals, the accountants, the lawyers, the engineers, the scientists, to go into teaching. But at the moment, they've effectively got to do a 2-year master's degree, and we want to see that dramatically shortened, going back to the old dip ed, so we can get more teachers into the classrooms. But the government has not embraced that reform, and we think it's desperately needed.
Do those sort of measures really work, though? Because we've had Teach for America, Teach for Australia, conversion incentives in the past to get, as you say, mid-career professionals to try to walk into a classroom. It does seem to a casual observer like me, though, to have had limited success.
Well, Teach for Australia is one very good program, and I think we need more programs like that. But as AMSI said to me yesterday, there are so many scientists and mathematicians who are saying, I want to get into the classroom, but I can't take 2 years off my work, particularly with Labor's cost of living crisis, to go and study full-time. Right. So we need to fast-track those experts in their field back into the classroom, and so there is much more the government could do in that regard.
What about pay incentive? Is that important here?
Look, I think it is, and some states and territories, and of course they are responsible for pay, are increasing the pay of teachers, and right across the country there are bonuses available to teachers, particularly to go into rural and remote areas. So pay, I don't think, is the biggest issue. Certainly, teachers want respect. They do an incredible job. They are responsible for the next generation of Australians.
Difficult circumstances.
And so we do need to see the teaching profession enhanced. We need more than an advertising campaign, which is what the government is doing. But certainly we need to see teachers supported with the best evidence-based teaching. Yeah. And that's now starting to happen in some school systems and in New South Wales. But that's a very, very big issue.
All right. Well, since we're sort of touching on the matter of dollars, can I also take you to the next school funding agreements, which Jason Clare is launching into negotiating? There is pushback coming from a number of states, but the biggest being New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland. They want up to 25% federal funding on these agreements. Are you sympathetic to their cause?
Well, I think the first point to make is the Commonwealth is already delivering full and fair funding under the Gonski funding schedule, and that's not in dispute. So the shortfall in funding is happening with the states, except for the ACT.
Sure.
But what we have seen is now a school funding shambles. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a national agreement, we haven't seen the reforms that school children deserve, the introduction of explicit teaching, other evidence-based reforms that we know are going to lift standards, because frankly, Greg, 1 in 3 school children is failing NAPLAN. Year 10 students are a year behind in their learning compared to 20 years ago. So we need to focus much more on what is happening in the classroom, because we've seen under the Coalition a huge increase in schools funding, but we really need to focus more on those reforms. So as I would say to Jason Clare, let's get a national agreement, but we also need those reforms.
All right. Well, alas, time is really squeezing us today, Sarah Henderson. Somehow, I think with Jason Clare having to negotiate so many of these, we might well have you back in the near future to run a ruler over what is negotiated there. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Greg. Great to join you.